He's absolutely Jason, he's absolutely gay. He'll absolutely brighten up the darkest rainy day. He's funny and loves movies, he's smart and he's a Jew. He's an actor and an activist and wants to hear from you.
Hey everybody, welcome to Absolutely Jason Stuart. My guest today is actor, comedian, host, writer, producer, director.
I do lighthouse work.
Yes, Renaissance man is what I sort of called you. Paul Provenza.
I'm not that old.
Well, no. I have to say I've had a virtual comedian's crush on you for such a long time.
I've known you for a million years. It's amazing when we stop and think about how long we've been around.
And I've always wanted to be a part of anything that you've done, probably too much, because I think that you've reinvented yourself constantly in such a creative way, and you seem to, more so than your brethren comedians, you seem to have your own way of doing things.
Well, you know what? That is I take that as a huge compliment, and that's a little bit new for me.
He's now on his phone. He's tweeting everybody.
I'm
so I don't think he's talking
yeah.
to.
Oh, I forgot we're on camera.
His girlfriend or whoever.
I was just tweeting about this appearance because
Yes.
that's how last minute I am. My whole life is cramming
Is
for
it?
an exam. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's actually only
I met
been
you
recently.
at the Improv when I was doing the Improv a lot through Claudia Lana, who basically got me in because no one wanted me.
Well, you know, I realized at some point that I don't think that as a comedian I can impress myself. I see so many great comedians who are working with really distinctive voices and really great perspectives on life, and I think I have some things to offer, but I don't see myself as somebody who can do anything to further the art form the way so many people I admire are. However, like you were talking about, was reinventing in some sort of original way. When it comes to, you know, making documentaries and certain other things that I do, my work as a director, I think I have a real idiosyncratic and particular way of doing things. And so I feel like that's where I can be.
I have to interrupt you. I disagree. I think you do have your own voice. I think you have, there's a sort of intellectual voice. I mean, if I think of other Italian-American comedians, you know, I don't think you have the same voice as they do.
Well, no, you're right, but I think it's just in terms of, for instance, when I do other things outside of stand-up, I feel like they really have an original stamp on them. Whereas in stand-up, while I'm trying to say original things and trying to do them in my way, I don't feel like it's as distinctive. It's much harder for me to identify who I am as opposed to everybody else doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, people are saying that Amy Schumer is the new voice, and I think she's terrific, but it's not a new voice.
She's a voice. She's a very good, extraordinary voice.
Yes, but it isn't. What she's saying, I think, in her television series is much more prevalent than what she was saying as a stand-up. Hey, I got drunk. Hey, I had sex with a lot of guys.
I agree with you. I think it gives her stand-up a much greater context. The same thing with Louis. Louis C.K.'s stand-up is extraordinary. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. But in context of all the other work he's doing as a creative entity, it sort of lifts his stand-up. It kind of gives you a context for where all that's coming from.
I do think so. I think people. I think what you're saying in terms of stand-up is really the truth, because I don't think that there are any more original voices. I think it's almost impossible.
It's well nigh impossible.
It's like no matter what I do, no matter what I talk about, no matter how I am, I'm still known as the gay guy comedian. It doesn't matter to some people. I have because they can't get past that thing. And for me, in the 90s, it was a big deal. Now it's
it was a bit of a hook for you. It was a way to market yourself, to find a target audience.
Oh man, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and as time has gone on, and the community has broadened, and culture has changed so much, it's not as distinctive a thing.
No, but it sort of is in some respects, because the comedy clubs have not changed. There are no gay guy headliners. There are no in the comedy clubs. You see that the only thing that's changed is that, I think in a really good way, is that there's a lot of people of color now in clubs.
Mm-hmm. I think it's much more diverse than it's ever been.
But it's all male.
Well,
there's
that's
one
not
woman.
True.
There's still one woman you can go to any club in town. It's usually one woman and mostly guys.
Yeah, there is a thing about if we have a show with 4 or 5 people, we can't have more than one woman on it.
It's still bullshit. Yeah. And there's still very few, if any, openly gay people.
Really? I disagree. I think there's more
Well, we should-
openly gay headliners than you.
Not really. No, I talked to my brethren. I know it's
Well,
sort of,
my perspective is a little tainted because I've been around the world.
Yes.
And certainly.
But you also, I'm talking about
Comedy in
we're
the
talking about
UK
comedy.
is-
Yes, comedy in UK. I think they're so ahead of us.
Yeah, there's some
So ahead of us.
in many ways.
Because
yeah.
it doesn't matter. Look, Graham Norton, certainly one of the biggest and most
Right.
successful.
Right. Yeah, he's huge there.
Oh,
His
yeah.
show is monster.
And probably set the tone for a way of talk shows. Now, you and Alan Havey, and I don't know which came first.
I think we were around the same time, actually.
You did. He had an Alan Havey show, and you had Comics Only.
Right.
Both shows I wanted to be on. Both shows I never got on.
You never got on Comics Only?
No.
Oh, that was just an oversight, I'm sure.
Yes, it was a very big one. You were one. What was that like? I mean, where did you come from, and how did you? Who brought you into that?
Well, Comedy Central was a new network. In fact, when I started doing Comics Only, and I think when Alan started doing Night After Night as well, Alan Havey, it was Ha.
The Ha channel and the Comedy Channel.
And then there was the Ha channel was MTV Networks, and the Comedy Channel was HBO, and some other people, I don't know, but basically HBO. And then it became clear that, and they had two very different vibes. Comedy Central was trying to do original programming. They were trying to do half-hour shows. They were, they had plans to function like a regular network in half-hour and hour blocks. Whereas the Comedy Channel was using MTV as the model, and we're talking about mid-'80s. So MTV was really just videos with VJs. And so they were doing that with comedy clips and all that sort of stuff. And they kind of learned from each other's mistakes. And then at one point they sort of realized...
Very, very soon after.
Yeah, very soon after. And they also realized that, we're competing against each other for the same audience that we're trying to kind of create. So they merged and became Comedy Central. So when we started Comics Only, it was for Ha. And then even when it became Comedy Central, the market penetration, no pun intended... I'm looking you in the eye when I say market penetration. The market penetration
I consider that a compliment.
was really slim. So it was like the stealth network. Like nobody even knew it existed. So we could do anything really. Nobody cared. I mean.
But everybody wanted to do your show.
Yeah, because when you think about it, still even back then there was very little stand-up on television, and so it was an opportunity to come on and be on a TV show. There just really isn't that much stand-up on TV right now. There's none in prime time.
There's one show on cable called Gotham Live, which
Right.
I just did.
Well, that's on
recently, and you hosted it,
Access TV.
which was on Comedy Central, and they got rid of it, which I don't understand why. It's the cheapest show to do, and it's such a great idea to keep that going, to keep reinventing, bringing new people on.
Yeah,
I think
and it's a great venue. It has a great energy.
Oh, and Chris Mazzulli,
Chris
the
Mazzulli
show
is
I was
great.
on, it was great because the show was so diverse.
Right.
It was one gay guy, me, one black guy, one blonde woman, and one white guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like great. It was like all these points of view. Lisa Lampanelli was the host, and it was really great as the audience seemed to love everybody.
Yeah. That was a great show. But there's very little of that. I mean, you used to even see that. You used to see the young comedian specials on HBO, the Showtime half hours. Comedy Central used to do half hours. And now nobody's
Comedy
really
Central
doing
still does, don't they?
occasionally,
Yeah.
but they've moved away from stand-up. They've moved more into half-hour stuff, Key and Peele,
Right.
which is sketch, Amy, which is sketch, and there is a stand-up element, but it's not a stand-up show.
Right.
Tosh.
Just sort of like a America's Home Video kind of modern version of that.
But, you really see very few stand-up specials on Comedy Central, certainly not like what it used to be.
What's funny is their most successful show, of course, was The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, with a guy who was in his 50s, who was so successful.
Well,
and yet at the same time, when they decided to bring it back with another person, they decided to do a younger version of the show, which I thought was so crazy.
I don't know. The show doesn't feel like it's skewed younger to me. I mean, yeah, Trevor's a younger guy, but it doesn't feel like the attitude of the show has
But
changed.
it's still not. It's not the sensibility of what it was before.
Well, but that was all Jon Stewart. I mean, before
Yeah.
John came along, it also wasn't that sensibility.
No, it was Craig.
When Craig Kilborn was
Kilborn,
on,
yeah,
it
who
was,
probably is killing himself.
I don't know. He's doing commercials now, so I don't know what that means. I know I could.
He's got to make a. He's got to make a living.
Yeah. But that's I mean, John is John, and that's what it is. That show is almost what it was because of Jon Stewart's
That's why it didn't
mentality.
make any
And they
sense
still got
to me.
amazing writers.
But
They still have
somebody
great perspective.
I would have chose somebody like you, or a woman, or somebody like Paula Poundstone, or somebody who was in their 50s, who had an incredible body of work and an incredible point of view in life.
Not
somebody who's just.
I mean, age does give you a certain gravitas in saying
It doesn't.
certain things.
It certainly does. And as I get older, I find, I don't know about you, I'm not that interested in listening to this guy talk. What has he got to say? He's 30-something years old.
Well, I'm a big fan of Trevor's. So,
are you?
So
I like him, but he's not like John, or not
but
like.
he does have an interesting perspective coming from South Africa. And I thought what was interesting about it was when he talks about race, which is big in America and big in certainly huge in this election. His perspective, I think, is a very, very interesting one because he comes from outside the American experience of being black, and I think that's an interesting voice.
I like him a lot. It just wouldn't have been my choice. I probably would have.
Yeah.
I would have probably picked a woman. In
Well, who knows why? Well, yeah. I mean, they missed the boat with Samantha Bee because her show is fantastic and she is great.
Very.
And why they didn't offer it to somebody within the family there who so clearly was of that Jon Stewart.
I think there's a
mold.
real anti anything but man thing now. That's the thing now, because they are, and I hear this. Being a gay guy, you got a lot of friends that are women, and because they're more comfortable with you, and I hear this from women all the time. And
Well, but I can tell you this though, that while that is true culturally, most networks, most people in most clubs, most everything in comedy are actively trying to be different about that. So there's actually, it's actually a better time than ever in terms of getting work on television as a woman and what have you.
I think so.
I don't think that the reason they didn't give it to Samantha Bee was, we don't want a woman hosting a talk show. I think there's a lot of other things at play there. For all we know, it could be that Samantha Bee just had a way better offer from where she's at now.
I still love Paula Poundstone.
Paula Poundstone, who I did Wait, Don't Tell Me for like 4 or 5 years with Paula Poundstone. Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR quiz show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
yes,
and did it with Paula bunches of times, and she's extraordinary at it. And Paula Poundstone could host a talk show tomorrow.
She had a show on ABC that lasted for like 2 episodes.
She had a show on HBO too.
Oh, did she?
Same thing.
Yeah, and it was so short-lived. They didn't even give it a chance.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, God, this gal is just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And
But she doesn't really play the showbiz game. Paula goes out and does the dates. Her fans come and see her. She's, her life is as important to her as her career. Her family, the kids that she has and all. And so she's at this great place where she kind of does live shows when and how she wants to do them and doesn't care to play the Hollywood or showbiz or TV game.
Well, I would hire her in a second.
In a second, she's brilliant.
I think she's great.
She's
think she's great. So I want to ask a couple questions. So the Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
Now, that was one of the most popular shows on television.
Yeah, you're going to blame me for getting it canceled?
No, not at all.
It's in my contract as cancellation scapegoat.
It's almost impossible to keep a show going that was so,
It was in the 6th year.
Yeah, and that guy, obviously, I think made one of the biggest mistakes of his career because he was never able to really recover from it. And when you leave in that way before something ends naturally, I think that there's some sort of weird juju that happens.
But you know what? You gotta ask yourself what people want. I mean,
You were terrific on the show.
Thank you. I mean, he might have just been tired of doing TV and he just wanted to do a couple of movies a year. And I mean, he's certainly not stopped working.
No.
So yeah.
What was that like for you to go from being in almost, cable or obscurity or just cool hip people digging you to all of a sudden being on a network show and having to stay within the parameters of something that was already a hit? So there was like this plan was already set the way you had to do stuff, and you were like, you obviously looked like him.
Well, that was totally fine because I was such a fan of the show, and the writing was just
phenomenal.
superb and unpredictable and odd
It was one of those first kind of shows that was like off the beaten track.
yeah, it was one of the first kind of quirky
Cable-ish
shows.
show, yeah.
So, you know, I never had anything but the greatest time with the material. The material was fantastic. Everybody working on the show was just wonderful. They embraced me with open arms. They were wonderful. I loved doing a show outside of Los Angeles. That really was a
Because you can really
treat.
focus on the work.
You could really focus on the work. It's not all showbiz all around you, and you can just enjoy your time in a great city like Seattle, which is where I was living at the time. And to be away from show business and doing that kind of work was just great. You realize when that happens, you realize how corrupting and debilitating being in Los Angeles is to just the work. You know. Anyway. I loved it. I was not embraced by the audience, who felt somewhat betrayed by Rob's departure.
Because in
And
those days, there was 4 channels, and people were like so obsessed with the show.
Northern Exposure fans were like Trekkies.
Yeah.
They knew every bit of detail about the backstories and the characters and what, things pop up in different episodes. They're crazy about it. They were nuts
And they didn't
about it.
shoot him and kill him like they do on the Walking Dead. So now people, you don't know whether they're going to your people. You don't know whether people are staying or going or what's going on.
Yeah,
Now,
right.
People, you can get shot or killed or
Right.
raped or lost in an alley
that
and
used
never
to
come
be
back.
only when contract negotiations didn't go well. When you get
Exactly.
killed off. Now you could sign on for a season and know you're going to die at the end of it. But eventually, people came around. Like I remember there were a couple of people who were like local fan club presidents, and they happened to be in places where I was going to work some clubs, and they would come and I would meet them and we'd talk and I'd sign autographs and whatever, and then they started to
And you
look a little
charmed
bit
them,
differently, and they
yes.
started to say, "All right, okay, we see what's
Well, they made a
going on,"
mistake. They didn't give
but
you
I
enough
basically,
time.
I basically had to say, "You look, he didn't leave because me. He didn't leave because I was coming on the show, or I didn't say give me the show." But make
You're the
sure
traitor,
Rob is
how
gone.
you took his
Yeah,
job,
Yeah,
right?
I just got a job and took it and trying to do the best work I can.
And with that
But it was
said-
a great experience. I loved
With
it.
that said, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back with Paul Provenza in just a moment on Absolutely Jason Stuart. Don't change that channel. Oh my God, we don't have any channels anymore.
Hey, I'm Dee Dee from Lady Pants, and you're watching the 10 women who are killing it in comedy. Here is number 3. Carrie Brownstein, a feminist musician, a sketch comedian, Fred Armisen's best friend, and a bisexual who doesn't feel the need to define herself by her sexuality. What more could we ask for? She and Steve Buscemi definitely share the award for most fascinating teeth, but I think I could give her a run for her money. But her gentle, character-driven take on life in Portland, Oregon warms the heart and tickles the LOL bone. Carrie, can we be besties? We promise we'll bring something to the table. How about a grass-fed, cruelty-free pigeon milk latte?
Let's do number 4. Hi, I'm Hanny from Lady Pants, and you're watching the top 10 women who are killing it in comedy. Let's do number 4. Tegan and Sarah. Speaking of musicians, adore talented Canadian twinsies Tegan and Sarah are quietly killing it all over the place. On Snapchat, in the recording studio, and on the awards circuit. They've got a Grammy nom under their belt as well as major commercial success. And while they're not technically comedians, this indie dance duo is friggin' hilarious on social media, and they are worth a follow just for their weird homemade cat videos.
The list doesn't stop here. Watch the next video.
Hey, welcome back to Absolutely Jason Stuart with my guest, Paul Provenza. We were talking in the break about comedy clubs, and I was saying that I headlined for literally 20 years and middled for around 5. And for me, I don't know how it was for you when you started, I really wanted to be a great headliner.
Yeah.
I wanted to sell
Yeah.
tickets, I wanted to be able to do the time, and I wanted to be funny.
Yeah.
And not always in that order.
But I also,
you
you
had to have
know-
those 3 things to make it work.
Yeah, that's right. But also that was pretty much the only way to perform as a comedian. I mean, either you got an opening act gig for some music act, and you went on tour.
Those
with
were
them.
hard to get.
They were hard to get. I toured with Diana Ross for like 5 years,
Wow.
off and on. I did gigs with the Beach Boys and Air Supply.
Diana Ross, what was she like?
She was great to me. She was great to me.
Did you have to sleep with? No.
I did not. I would have. She was hot.
Very.
No, she was great, and people always say that she was really, really tough to work with. But I actually watched where that toughness came from. It was like she didn't expect anything of the musicians that she was working with. She didn't expect anything that she wasn't ready to give herself. Like, she was a perfectionist. And when you're tough because your values are, let's
I
give the
hate
audience
that.
the best show and make the best
Yeah.
music and all that. That was great. I thought she was great.
I hate that.
loved
And
working
somebody
with
will
her.
write about somebody having a bad day, and people don't know how hard it is to travel alone, or I don't know about you. When I did my TV special, it was called Making It to the Middle, and it was an hour show, not just about the stand-up, but what the whole entailed on being on the road, and how difficult it is to fly by yourself. Make sure you get to all these radio things. Are they going to pick you up? It's just stress constantly.
Yeah, there's a lot of logistics.
Some kid
involved.
forgets to pick you up at the
But
airport.
hers was a big operation, but still, she was about the quality of the show, and she would stay in rehearsal as long as she expected the musicians to stay in rehearsal. It wasn't one of those diva things at all. She just really wanted to do the best she could do, and have the show be the best. But anyway, but doing clubs.
How long did you do them? How long did you headline consistently? Or is it been
all through the 80s, 90s, and
early 2000s?
Early 2000s, and actually really even longer than that, because I was doing that overseas. I was doing, I was working in the UK, and various club circuits that booked out of the UK that took me to places like the Middle East and China and all that sort of stuff. So basically my whole life been doing clubs. But
that's a different experience, don't you think? Because you're doing one-offs. And it's
well, no, some of them aren't. Some of them are weekends and things like that. But yeah, no, for the most part, it's a different experience because there's more. You're a little bit outside your comfort zone when you're in some place like Hong Kong, talking to English-speaking expats. You don't know what the common references are. You don't know, but it's also you also have the experience of being there to talk about, and to connect with people on, and just anything that breaks up the monotony of going, this week I'm in Dayton, next week I'm in Cleveland, the week after that I'm in Indianapolis. That becomes monotonous, and there's a certain sameness to most of the comedy club audience.
But in the
around
beginning
the
years,
country.
did you feel in the beginning years when you were first starting headlining that you're able to do that 45 minutes or 50 minutes, and you're able to? People don't know that during the last 15 minutes is when they put down the checks. Which they don't do in other countries and other places.
True. That's true.
And in New York, even they don't do it anymore. In New York, they have a kid come in who's new during the check putting down. That's a new thing they do.
That's great, because that's torture. That is a skill that you could never depend on. Like, whenever I thought I had check time figured out, I would be proven wrong, because if you're doing an hour set or 45 minutes or an hour set, right, and you have any sense of structure, you're building towards something. And just as you're getting to the place where everything needs to come together, boom, people are adding up the check and taking out the wallets, and who had the martiny, and
why'd you drink so much?
Tequila
And
Sunrise.
God,
Yeah,
this is too expensive.
Yeah, torture, absolutely torture. But
I always think it was like Charlton Heston and Ben-Hur, and you're like holding on to that cord, and I'm going through this.
Yeah.
I'm going through this. I'm going to make it. I'm going to barrel through. God damn it.
And I try a million different things. I try putting a piece in there that was more crowd chatter stuff,
or very
more
physical, so you
forth,
make them
or
look
something
up.
really physical, or something that. But every time, I try to work towards, like I say, you try and get this sort of trajectory from the beginning, shooting all the way to the end, to tie up all your ideas and all that sort of stuff. And whenever I would try to do something specifically to deal with check time, I found it always broke the flow and everything. So yeah, you just grit your teeth and bear it.
Do you think there's ageism in comedy clubs now?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. I think there's ageism in show business, period.
I do too.
It's one of the few worlds in which, well, it may not be true actually, because I know it's even true in, Wall Street. There's tremendous ageism. I've got friends who've been, brokers and people at Bear Stearns and whatever.
Oh, I think it's in this country.
As they've gotten older, boom, everything starts to trail off and they get pushed out because it's all about the young guys coming in from the business school. And so I don't know what industries it's not present in. I mean, I don't think I think if you're a doctor and you're pushing 60, you have a certain bit of credibility, Whereas for comedians, if you're pushing 60 and you're not a star already, it's really, really hard. It's really hard.
Do you have the same passion for acting as you do for stand-up?
I do. I do very much so. And at some point early on in my career, they sort of merged. I sort of realized that I used to think they were two very separate things. But at some point, it became clear that they're really the same. And the better comedian you are means you're a better actor, and the better actor you are makes you a better comedian.
Interesting. Why?
Because you want to be truthful.
Oh,
and you want
I
to
see what
be
you're saying.
you want to be authentic, and you want to be in the moment. So, here's the thing about a lot of stand-up comedy is say you're telling a story about what happened to you when you went to France. You can tell that story, or you can experience that story. And so as I developed as an actor, I began to realize that if I were talking about stuff in stand-up, but I were really feeling the things that I was talking about, I was really experiencing the frustration or the anger or the doubt or the fear or whatever, that it became heightened, that the audience connected to it in a different way, and it meant something differently. So it's the difference between great screenwriting, or playwriting. Show, don't tell. Don't tell me what happened when this thing happened in
It's
your
harder.
life. Show me.
Don't you
what
find it's
happened.
harder to work on pieces that do that when someone is in the material? If the material isn't good,
Well, not every comedian is the same. A lot of comedians are
No, but
really
even
just about
just
the sort
as
of haiku of a joke.
But just the actor, though, I find it really difficult now because I've had a couple opportunities to work with some great people in the last couple of years, and I'm finding that I think, God, this is really harder to do. I feel like I'm here. I don't want to go back. How do I do this? How do I find the funny in this, or how do I find the depth in this, or the sadness in it when it just isn't there?
Yeah.
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 I wind up improvising a little.
Well, that also, kind of tells you about what it is you're doing. And that's why you asked me before, why, am I doing clubs anymore or whatever? And I am. I just haven't been. And the reason I haven't been doing it much is because of that. Is like, well, what is my voice? What is the material that I really care about? What do I want to talk about?
And are those people who want to hear it coming to the clubs, you said?
Exactly, yeah.
And I find that they're not. I feel they're not. They'll come to a theater to see you. They'll come to a cabaret to see you. They'll come to other venues. They do not want to come to comedy clubs per se. And I think because psychologically they have created this environment in comedy clubs that is anti-breathing, anti-art, anti-talking about something different.
Well, I've always wondered why comedy and nightclubs grew up together, because if you look at comedy as a real art form, nightclubs are all about drinking. And the more people drink, the better off the nightclub's doing, but the worse it is, for you as an artist trying to play to them. So,
But, in the 60s, it wasn't that way. It wasn't drinking. It was coffee houses and places like that.
Well, there were also, it also came up in the jazz clubs and the bebop clubs, which was about drinking whatever, but a different
or
sort
supper
of mentality.
houses.
What happened in the 80s with the comedy boom is that comedy became a vehicle to sell chicken wings and quesadillas and alcohol. And the comedy was really just a device for that. So, you had a lot of clubs open up in strip malls, and you had franchises, of clubs, and you had business people getting into the comedy club business as opposed to people who were passionate about comedy getting into the comedy club business. And I think the audience eventually grew tired of that. I think the audience, realized that, and they start to feel the inauthenticity of it. There's still some great people doing those rooms.
Oh, God, yeah.
But it's in spite of, not because of the room. But the good news is the rise of the alternative scene, which is where, somebody like a Doug Stanhope will play a rock and roll club. And I see Dave Chappelle playing, music clubs, and people are there just to see the
I
show.
work once a month.
That's why I love the Nerd Melt room here in Los Angeles, because they don't serve anything. You come in, you sit down, you watch comedy, and it's like the purest audience/comedy experience, around, because they're not interested in getting
Do you
money
work
for
at that
other
club?
things.
Do you do that room?
We do set lists there.
Yeah, I did it once at another smaller club a couple times. It was really fun.
Yeah.
It was really
Yeah, I love a
amazing.
lot of the alternative venues. I love that there are pop-up clubs and there are backyard clubs. We did some work with Surprise Comedy, which is where it's in a different venue every month. You don't know where it is until the day of. They tell you where to go. Sometimes it's somebody's backyard. Sometimes it's a shop that's closed at night and they bring chairs in and do a show. It's great. It's great, and it gives you this vibe of like, oh wow, we're doing something kooky, and this is fun that we're here sharing this experience. You know, I love it. I love the venues that are about what's going to happen on this stage. We, the audience, are part of what's happening on this stage, and nobody gives a crap about selling chicken wings.
I think it's so great that you speak with such passion about it. That's sort of what I love about you from afar, is that you've done that. I think that a lot of people from our generation, I don't know if you noticed in your friends, have sort of given up on certain things. They say, I don't do that. I don't do that, and I don't want to be. I'm not one of those people. I don't want to. I don't want to be a person that says I don't do that. I say I don't know how to do that yet, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, a big inspiration for me is the great Rick Overton, who has been a very close friend almost from day one of my getting into the comedy world.
I love him.
He's
been on the show.
He is one of those people who, when I want to know about what's new that's going on, or where are the rooms in town that are kind of off the beaten path or whatever, he's played them all. He's like, he's my generation, but he has never stopped just doing the comedy. He doesn't care where it is.
He's also so kind.
He's so
and
kind
so
and generous.
supportive.
But that's all part and parcel. He was about the passion of doing comedy, and it doesn't matter to him whether he's at the Hollywood Bowl or he's playing a little room with 25 people in some basement in West LA. He doesn't care. He's all about the art of the comedy, and that has inspired me for all these decades that I've known Rick. I've watched it never that flame never gets snuffed out, and he's been a real inspiration.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And both of you have been to me.
Well, that's very kind.
Both of you. I mean, Rick, I did a show with him at an apartment complex that was, I guess it was so big in Park La Brea that they had
I know that.
They had an
I know
actual
the gig.
theater.
Yeah. That's like a community center kind
Right,
of thing.
and he hadn't seen me in like 10 years do comedy. We hadn't, our lives had not meshed in that way. And he was like, oh my God, look what's happened to you. And he made me feel so a part of the scene. I've always felt like I'm on the outside looking in. That's sort of my thing that I have to always work on not doing it.
Right.
It's always being a little afraid of all the people, because I think I didn't go to college. So if you don't go to college, I don't think you have that way of learning how to socialize with
That's
people.
interesting, yeah.
And I didn't go to college because I was gay. I know that's
That's
weird.
why you didn't go to college?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Was that a question on the application form?
No, I was beat up so much in school that I was afraid to go because I thought I associated school with being treated badly.
Where'd you grow up?
Here in Los Angeles.
The irony is that if you got to college, it would have been a whole different experience for you.
Exactly. If I would have known that,
Right.
but I didn't know that. I didn't have
Right.
anybody to tell me. It was a different time.
Right.
It's
Right.
probably a big. You're not allowed to say it's a regret, but it is a regret because I've always had to sort of learn how to maneuver myself in life with people, and I'm probably one of the shyest people in my head where it doesn't come out that way.
Well, the flip side of that is you became a one-man band before everybody had to become a one-man band in comedy. Like now you got to do everything yourself. And you got to do publicity and promotion and booking and this and that. And you've been doing it from day one.
Always had to.
You have always been the guy who let everybody know what he was doing, when, that he was available to do stuff, whatever. You were a tremendous
Whether they wanted me or not.
self-starter, a big self-starter. Yeah. And
Well, I think I wrote a piece recently called "Showing Up and Full of Gratitude," and I wrote a piece about that because of the movie I'm in, Birth of a Nation, and that's what it is. It's about showing up no matter what,
Right.
and with gratitude.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's probably doing better for you at this point in your life than it was even back then.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think you need that more than ever as you get older.
Oh yeah. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back here with Paul Provenza, who's now interviewing me. I don't know how that turned around, but I didn't even see it coming. He's so used to him. I felt like I was pretending I was on Green Room, and I want to talk about that because that was my fantasy. We'll be right back in just a moment. Please stay with us.
What we do here is go back.
Hi, I'm Rob Schneider,
Hi, I'm Martha Madison.
Hello, I'm Eric Roberts.
Hi, this is Brad Williams.
and you're watching Z.
Z Hollywood TV.
I start. Hi, I'm Moxie.
And I'm Nicole, and we're the ladies of Suicide Girls Radio, the world's leading BYOB radio show. Pour a glass of your favorite tipple and tune in on Wednesday nights between 8 and 9 p.m. as we discuss life, liberty, and the pursuit of free nipples. Oh, just flash it would be kind of funny, wouldn't it? People think flashing your tits is easy, right? And it's actually kind of hard.
I'm Money B, and you can kiss my ass.
Let me swallow my snot.
That's sexy.
Keep up the good work, Mile Net.
Let me see how I'm coming. Check out.
No, I love you.
Oh, yeah, why no cyclocyanabin, the little...
You take one, there you go.
Always switching up. Always switching up.
It's my wedding band. Jumped out of my... Oh, my God, I hope it's not an omen. Call my wife.
He keeps moving away.
Hi, I'm Rob Schneider, and you're watching T Hollywood V.
Z Hollywood TV.
Dang a bang.
Nailed it.
And we're back at Absolutely Jason Stuart with my guest, Paul Provenza, who was the host of Green Room, which was just so fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah,
You were 2 seasons, right?
Yeah, we did 14 episodes for Showtime. Yeah, and I'm so not done with that show. I'm
don't.
trying
Please don't.
So
Please
hard
don't.
to get it back up again. But
What can I do? Who can I talk to?
I don't know. But the question you should have asked is who could I blow? Because that could come in handy.
I would be happy to.
I'll let you know.
I just to help you out, you know.
No,
I'm a team player.
You know, the TV business is very...
Showtime was happy, though, with it the first season because they did it the second, right?
Yeah, just a change of administration. Just a new president came in. And
I don't want anybody else's stuff.
There's that. There's I want to open up real estate for some stuff I do want and blah, blah, blah. There's all that stuff. There's, and plus with pay TV, it's...
What about Comedy Central?
I would imagine it's all way too skew and old for them. I don't know for sure.
Well, no,
but also, they don't do things about comedy. Like, really, if there's any place that...
This is the perfect show for that channel. I mean...
I know, because
channel for that show.
it is comedy, while at the same time... Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's so perfect.
Jason, you're trying to figure out a completely illogically driven business. You know, the things that matter in the TV business. TV business is industrialism. It has nothing to do with us making jokes or being funny or anything. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with what people like.
Tell me what was the most exciting things that happened on that show that surprised you?
Wow, there's so many of them. Because and that's the thing that I'm most proud of. Because, we developed the show for a couple of years at the Edinburgh Fringe, where all I knew that I wanted of the show was that it be authentic. And now in retrospect, like, we're talking about, it's probably been about 6 years since it's been on the air, and it was about another 2 or 3 years before that we were developing it. But now it's really essentially a glorified podcast. And, there is real authenticity available between comedians and ideas and what have you. But at the time, there wasn't really a paradigm for anything being that authentic with comedians hanging out. And it's very hard to get comedians to forget about the fact that there are cameras there, and that drove the whole production style. And what we wanted was the audience to, because I always I always had trouble whenever you see comedy on television. I feel like they've always forced comedy to adapt to the medium of TV production. And it's the most beautiful things about comedy, which are the spontaneity and the unexpectedness and that spark of life. Always seems to get lost because you got to sit here, the two shot here, one shot there.
That's when the live show started to
everything's,
become much more exciting.
So we decided to produce the green room in the antithesis, in a manner that was the antithesis, which is the camera people were all told, this is like shooting news and sports. We don't know who's going to have the ball. We don't know who's going to pull the gun out and who's going to shoot who. So just be ready to move. So we have a lot of dynamic kind of camera work and stuff, which captured
You had
that,
4
that
comedians
sort of,
on plus yourself.
Sometimes there were 5, yeah, depends.
So you'd had to have
It
one
was-
camera for each person.
Well, kind
Or
of. I
some-
mean,
yeah.
not really, but what it was we, like I said, we just told all the cameramen, you know, you're shooting news and sports from different angles. Just do what you would do to get the story, basically, you know. And so that gave us an amazing amount of coverage with a real sense of spontaneity, where the camera has to move to find who whipped this off or
So
who
the editing was
responded to
really
that.
one of the biggest parts of doing the show.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly.
Were
yeah.
you
And
involved in that, or was it
yes, Yes, I was involved in that because we taped for about an hour for a half-hour show, an hour and 10 minutes or so. So what I wanted to do was make a little film, basically, of every green room. So, you know, when you're telling a story to somebody, you don't tell every little detail. You tell the parts that are the most interesting, or that say what you want to say. So that's what the way we approached the editing was, just basically let's just tell the story that we want to tell of this night in a half hour instead of an hour.
So I would have loved to have seen it for an hour. I could have watched it for an hour.
Yeah, well, we could have done it for an hour, and Showtime unfortunately didn't have any significant sort of online component where you could say, hey, here's the uncut. See, you know, the whole thing.
Right.
This is, yeah, it's a shame.
So
It's a
who
shame.
who surprised you on the show? That you knew that, you know, with
Well, there were a lot of surprises, but it was also very well thought out. See, for me, the palette was the talent I put together, and there was a lot of thought put into who was on a panel with whom. In fact, we scrapped entire shows because somebody dropped out, and it wasn't just about, oh, who's available, plug them in. You know, we worked really hard at putting together the right combination of people, and there are a lot of layers to that.
Because I kept fantasizing, as I was on the show, I did not want to become the butt of the joke. And that's what happens a lot of times when I'm in a group of people.
Right.
And that was my thing as a kid, to protect myself. And
Right.
So when I would fantasize about being on the show, I thought, oh, I can't be on this one. Because
Right.
if so-and-so, if Jeff Wayne was on, then he would do this to me, or if this one was on, he would do that to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd become...
Well, one of my favorite episodes was the one with Gary Shandling, and that was a pretty loaded episode. It was Gary Shandling, Ray Romano, Mark Maron, Judd Apatow, and that was the show. And I was looking at it on the board, and I was like, there's something missing from this show that makes it particularly interesting to me. Like, I know it's going to be interesting. I know there's going to be an interesting conversation. I know it's going to be funny, but there's something missing. Like, I feel like this could be bumped up a notch. And as I was staring, looking at the cards on the board, I get a phone call. Bo Burnham on the line, because I had put a call into him about something else. And I just went, oh, my God, Bo Burnham. He's got to be in that group of people. Mm-hmm. And I can't really explain what it was that made that so meaningful to me. Something to do with the fact that he's a young guy, but also because he's a young guy that's really smart and is an extraordinary comedian. I mean, he's a prodigy. He's brilliant. And at the time, I think he was 21. And I just looked at it and went, boy, if Mark Maron goes after him, he can hold his own. He can hold his own. And, you know, it just felt like...
Well, you have to know your place in comedy and where you belong with someone else, and you have to know I would say whether you're Dean Martin or whether you're Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
You have to know where you're going to be.
The thing about Bo was that, yes, he knows that. He knows that he was a 20-year-old in a room full of, you know, these older, like, hugely successful comedians. But he also knows that he has what it takes. So, you know, he's got the confidence of somebody who is many years beyond his age. in all the right way. I don't mean as any
course.
sort of egotism or cockiness. It's just like he just knows that what he does is what he does, and he's doing it well. So that was a great one because as Bo ends up sort of emerging as like, who is this kid, you know? And so here's a room full of, like I said, Marin and Romano
Icons.
and icons, and yet Bo is the one that drew attention, and that made everybody else interesting too because it was really interesting to see them just give it to him.
Well, you put a little spice in the oatmeal is what you did.
That's what I tried to do on every show. The conversation between Roseanne Barr
I was going to say that
and
she was
Patrice O'Neill, I thought was wonderful.
Yeah.
And that was a very well thought out episode too, because I know that Patrice is a no BS guy. Patrice, like he does not tolerate any conversation, even in life, that's not meaningful or substantive. Like he's not a chit chat guy, right? I was putting Saget on the show too because I knew that they had toured together years ago, and Saget is a great guy, but it takes a lot to get Saget off. It takes a lot to get Saget to stop being the guy who just throwing one-liners out there, And I knew that Roseanne had seen Patrice and thought he was wonderful, but Patrice didn't know that. And I thought, one of the amazing things about Patrice is that he drives everything. I mean, you could listen to hundreds of hours of Patrice O'Neill on Opie and Anthony, and all this. There's just a ton of Patrice out there. But he always ruled the roost, and I knew that he was a little bit intimidated by Roseanne. So I thought, well, that will be interesting because I also knew that Roseanne loved him, and he didn't know that. He didn't know that Roseanne even knew who he was. So that was a really interesting connection, and the connection that Roseanne and Patrice had was phenomenal. He was talking about his career and everything, and Roseanne just stops and just goes, "Hey, but what about your work?" And you see Patrice go, "Oh, I love doing what I'm doing," but it's like you got to see a whole other side of what would have been a Patrice bulldozing rant in every direction, no matter when he started talking.
So she totally surprised. Because people are intimidated by. I mean, everybody's.
Yeah.
She comes with a lot of steamer trunks full of shit.
And he's talking about, I love saying the N-word. I love saying the N-word. Whatever. And Roseanne would just go, "Why do you love that?" And Patrice would have to really engage because he had so much respect for Roseanne, and he didn't. As a decent human being, he wouldn't just bulldoze over her. And so that was the beauty of the show, was putting together these personalities that I just knew some interesting stuff would come out of them.
What about Sandra Bernhard? I love that. What do you?
Yeah, she's great. I love Sandra, and I think Sandra's never really gotten her due as a comedian. Partly because she sort of separated herself in the way that she does a lot of music
But
she's
she's also.
she's a fantastic comedian.
But she's not. I've worked with her. She's got a lot going on.
Yeah, she's got a lot going on.
Loves
And she's sharp as a tack, and this is what I love about her the best. She will say anything she believes, and she will not back down for it. And I loved that. And I thought, what better place to put her than with Roseanne and Patrice and Bob Saget?
Well, Roseanne just loved her.
Yeah.
Just loved her.
Yeah.
I mean,
she's great.
What was it like,
and that was another thing that I loved about doing the show was it was a chance to show people comedians that you wouldn't think have anything in common, but they completely are connected.
Oh. Well, there's a brother and sisterhood in that world
that
is major.
Yeah. And one of my favorites was putting Jamie Kilstein on the show with Ron White. Because Ron White is, thought of as being one of the blue-collar comics, whatever, and Jamie Kilstein is this vegan, atheist, hipster guy, but they were fantastic together, and I loved illustrating that, who you are as a comedian, whatever. If you're a comedian, that trumps all, and you'll listen to another comedian.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll respect another comedian. And there's that connection that reminds viewers, certainly the ones who are hip to comedy, that, oh, okay, so you can be this kind of person and be an artist, but you can also be this kind of person and be an artist. And you don't, it's not politics.
There's a respect.
It's show
also,
business.
there's a respect for time and class. And I don't mean class in terms of class of being classy. I mean class of what class you're in. Even though you and I are similar in age, you're in a class above me. Because you're
a graduating class above you.
Yes,
yes,
you are.
I started a few years ahead of you.
Yeah, and I didn't start until later. I started as an actor. So and there's an incredible respect about the time that you've done in the trenches.
Right.
And if you haven't, you have to know when you can speak and when you can and who you're talking to. And the kids that I mentor, I try to teach them that. one kid that I mentor opened for me recently, and he said, "Well, I put this kid in I put him in one of my movies." And it was like, you don't say that. There's a certain way. There's a respect, and no matter what you feel about whether you like their show or not, you can say, "Hey, I really respect what this person has done,
right,
and the talent that he or she has."
Right, right.
And it's not about whether you like what they're saying or how they're doing or their style. That talent is talent. It doesn't matter. Like Larry the Cable Guy, don't get it, but he's brilliant.
He's hilarious.
But it doesn't
pound for pound,
hysterical.
Joke after joke, hilarious.
May not be my cup of tea.
Exactly.
I wouldn't pay a ticket for it, but I have tremendous respect.
That's what I tell people
who
diss Carrot Top all the time. People.
Oh God, no.
It became like a thing to diss Carrot Top. I go, you know what? If you like the kind of thing that Carrot Top does, nobody does it better.
Oh, no.
And he's a solid pro. And I defy you, even if you are the most anti-Carrot Top.
Did you have him on the show?
Ever. I defy you to watch his show and not find yourself laughing giddily.
Because he's become such a punchline that people don't even know what the show is anymore.
Right.
Did you have him on the show?
No, I didn't have him on the show. I hope to. Listen, that's why I hope. So many great shows I want to do. So I hope that we can get it back up and going.
This has been so lovely. I could talk to you for another hour. I didn't get to most of my notes. I feel terrible.
Well, let's do it again sometime.
I would love to.
All right.
How do we find you? Tell people how we can find you.
At Paul Provenza on Twitter.
Okay.
I will be at the Reason Rally in Washington, D.C. on June 4th.
I love that.
Which is, it's Kelly Carlin, Margaret Cho, Annabelle Gurwitch, Julia Sweeney, a whole bunch of the guys from Wu-Tang Clan, and all kinds of speakers, scientists, journalists, it's a gathering of free thinkers, people who believe in separation of church and state, people who want to see science education move forward in schools instead of being set back decades. And it's a party. It's a celebration. There's nothing we're protesting, and it's going to be on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. We did one several years ago.
What's the date?
It's June 4th in Washington, D.C. So I'll be at the Reason Rally with all those great people, and I promise you that's going to be fun. I do have a website, but just go to my Twitter. Everything is on there.
Okay.
I do Set List, which is planned Saturday night at Nerd Melt.
Oh, wonderful.
It's coming Saturday night. Great lineups there. And follow Green Room with PP on Twitter. Follow Satiristas, Satiristas. And Comics Only, the show you talked about from Comedy Central back in the day, Comics Only.
Which is I'm
putting up clips.
Which is really the baby show to the Green Room. It really is.
Yes,
it really is.
Yes, it was the more sophomoric version of hanging out with comedians in a way that became really authentic with Green Room.
Thank you so much for doing the show.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Okay. Everybody, take care. I'll talk to you next week.
He's absolutely Jason, he's absolutely gay. He'll absolutely brighten up the darkest rainy day.